The first call, it was close to midnight when Anna's phone rang for the very first time. She had been sitting alone in her living room, the television humming softly in the background, when the sudden vibration on her table made her jump. At that hour, no one ever called her. She lived a quiet life, far from friends and family, and most of her evenings ended with her falling asleep on the couch. Curious but uneasy, she reached for the phone. The number on the screen was blocked. Against her better judgment, she answered. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then came the faintest sound, breathing. Not fast or shaky, but calm, steady, and deliberate, as if whoever was on the other end wanted her to hear it. "Hello?" she said, her voice sharp. Still no reply, only that breathing. She hung up, shaking her head, telling herself it was just some prank. But her heart continued to beat faster than usual. Minutes later, the phone rang again. Same blocked number. This time, she hesitated, staring at the screen as if deciding whether or not to let it ring. Curiosity won. She pressed the green button. A whisper slipped through the speaker. "I can see you." Anna froze, her hand tightening around the phone. Her eyes darted to the window. The curtains were drawn, but she felt the weight of someone watching. Slowly, she pulled them open, only to find the empty street below bathed in pale yellow light. No one stood there. Trying to convince herself it was a cruel joke, she closed the curtains again and laughed nervously. But her laugh didn't sound right. It felt forced, broken. For the rest of the night, every sound in her apartment seemed louder. The ticking of the clock, the hum of the fridge, the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet. She tried to sleep, but her mind replayed the words over and over. The next day, she told herself it was nothing, just kids fooling around, yet deep down, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that someone out there really had been watching her. And as the clock crept closer to midnight once again, she found herself dreading the sound of the phone. Signs of watching. The calls did not stop after that first night. In fact, they grew more consistent, as if following a pattern. Every evening, just as the clock struck midnight, Anna's phone would ring, and each time the same blocked number would appear on the screen. Sometimes the caller said nothing at all, just long, heavy silence with faint breathing in the background. Other nights, the voice would whisper words that made Anna's blood run cold. But the strangest part wasn't the calls. It was how much the voice seemed to know. One night, the whisper said, "Red looks good on you." Anna had just changed into a red tee, shirt minutes before. Another night, it said, "You shouldn't eat so late." She had been standing in her kitchen, finishing a small bowl of cereal. There was no way anyone could have known those details, not unless they were close enough to see her. By now, fear had crept into every part of her life. She began double checking the locks on her door, pulling the curtains tight, and unplugging her TV at night just so the room would be completely silent. But even in silence, the phone always found her. One morning, Anna left her apartment to go to work, only to find something strange on the floor outside her doorway. A single black feather. It looked like it had been placed there deliberately, right on the center of her doormat. She bent down and picked it up, holding it between trembling fingers. She didn't own a bird. None of her neighbors did either. The feather was not the only clue. Over the following days, she noticed other unsettling things. Her mail seemed to have been moved around in the box. The small rug in front of her couch appeared slightly out of place, as if someone had stepped on it while she was away. Even the smell of her apartment felt different, like someone else's cologne had briefly lingered in the air. Still, the calls continued. The whispers grew bolder, more confident. Each word carried a weight that left her sleepless, pacing her apartment until sunrise. It was no longer a prank. It felt like a warning, a game where she was the unwilling player. And though Anna tried to tell herself it was all in her imagination, deep down, she knew. Someone was out there. Someone was watching the visit. The storm rolled in just after sunset. Heavy rain hammered against the windows, and the wind howled through the narrow streets like a restless spirit. Anna sat curled up on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, trying to distract herself with the flicker of the television. But her nerves were already frayed. She knew what time it was. She knew the call would come. When the lights suddenly flickered and went out, her heart nearly stopped. The entire apartment building was swallowed in darkness. The hum of the fridge died, the TV screen blinked to black, and the only sound left was the storm outside. Anna sat frozen, listening to the rain and the thunder echo through her walls. And then it came. The phone rang. She fumbled in the dark, her hands shaking as she searched for the glowing screen. The same block number. Midnight had arrived right on schedule. Against every instinct screaming at her not to answer, she pressed the button and lifted the phone to her ear. This time, the voice was not vague. It was sharp, clear, and terrifyingly close. "I'm inside." Anna gasped, dropping the phone onto the couch. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and flicked it on, her pulse pounding in her ears. The beam of light cut across the apartment as she searched every corner. The bathroom, the kitchen, behind the curtains. Nothing. Everything was exactly as it should be. And then she noticed it, the closet door. It was slightly open. Her breath caught in her throat. She was certain she had shut it earlier that day. The crack was small, but wide enough that the darkness inside seemed to spill out into the room. Slowly, with trembling steps, she crept closer, the flashlight beam quivering in her hands. Her phone rang again, vibrating against the cushions. The sudden sound made her jump. She snatched it up with one hand and pressed it to her ear, her eyes locked on the closet door. The voice whispered, "Don't look." Anna dropped the phone instantly, her chest tightening with panic. She bolted from the apartment, barefoot, pounding on her neighbor's door until they opened. When they returned with her moments later, the closet was empty. Nothing was inside. But the phone still lay on the floor. The call connected. The police investigation the morning after the storm, Anna finally called the police. Her voice trembled as she explained everything: the midnight calls, the whispers, the threats, and the closet door that had opened on its own. 2 officers arrived at her apartment later that day, notepads in hand, listening carefully, but with expressions that suggested they'd heard stranger things before. Still, they took her phone and examined the call history. That's when the first real shock came. The officers confirmed that the calls had not come from an outside number at all. They were being made from her own landline, the very line that was connected inside her apartment. Anna's stomach dropped. She hadn't used that landline in years. It was nothing more than a dusty phone, shoved into a corner, long forgotten. The police checked it, picking up the receiver. It worked perfectly. Someone had been calling her using her own phone. The officers searched the apartment from top to bottom. They opened cupboards, tapped along the walls, even shone their flashlights into the vents. No intruder, no signs of forced entry, no hidden devices. To them, it looked like nothing more than a technical glitch or perhaps a prank that Anna herself didn't understand. They left her with a warning to stay vigilant and to call immediately if anything escalated. But the very same night, the nightmare returned. Anna, desperate to take control, unplugged the landline entirely. She pulled the cord from the wall and shoved the phone into a drawer. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of relief. Maybe this would stop it. At midnight, her cell phone rang. Her body went cold as she picked it up. The blocked number again. And when she answered, the voice was sharper, angrier, almost mocking. "You can't stop me." Her hands shook so badly, she nearly dropped the phone. She slammed it down on the table, her breath shallow. She called the police again. But when they arrived, there was nothing they could do. There was no evidence, no trace of anyone having entered her apartment. Yet her neighbors began whispering. A few claimed they heard footsteps in the hall outside Anna's door when she wasn't home. Others swore they had heard a man's voice echoing faintly in the middle of the night, even when her lights were off. It wasn't just Anna anymore. The midnight caller's presence was spreading. The final call, a week later, Anna's neighbor noticed something unusual. Her curtains had stayed closed for days. No lights flickered on at night, and the sound of her footsteps, once a regular presence in the quiet building, was gone. Concerned, the neighbor knocked on her door. There was no answer. Hours passed, and still silence. By the next morning, worry spread. The landlord was called, and with a spare key in hand, he unlocked the door. What they found inside was unsettling. The apartment looked perfectly normal, almost too normal. The bed was neatly made. The dishes stacked in the sink were clean, and Anna's shoes were lined up carefully by the door. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no chaos. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. On the nightstand sat her phone, its screen still glowing faintly with a full charge. The call log revealed something chilling: one last incoming call. It had arrived at exactly midnight. The duration showed 3 hours. No one knew who she had been speaking to during that time. The police launched a full investigation, but there were no leads. Anna's belongings were all in place. Her purse, her keys, even her wallet. Nothing had been taken. Her front door had been locked from the inside. And yet, Anna herself was gone. Rumors spread quickly through the building. Some neighbors claimed they had heard her voice late that night, speaking softly as if in conversation. Others insisted they had heard a man whispering, his voice low and steady, though no one had seen anyone enter or leave her apartment. Weeks turned into months, and still no trace of Anna was ever found. The case grew cold. The only piece of evidence left behind was her phone and that single final call. But the story didn't end there. A few months later, strange reports began to surface. People who had known Anna claimed their phones rang at midnight from a blocked number. And when they answered, they all described hearing the same whisper that Anna had heard on her very first night. "I can see you." Some dismissed it as a coincidence. Others swore it was her trying to reach out from wherever she had disappeared. But the ones who stayed on the line too long, they stopped answering their doors as well.